Happy New Year. My name is Karl Bruster, and I'm a leader here at God Word Ministry. This is Testimony Tuesdays. Here at God Word Ministries, our mission statement is, we choose God over the devil at all times, going God's way as a church in our way of life. Also, our vision here is to inspire people to go Godward for the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry, and for the edifying of the body of Christ. It says in the Bible in Revelations 12 and 11 that they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. So we're starting a new series here called Testimony Tuesdays, where I tonight will start giving my testimony. And as the future goes, in future Tuesdays, I will start having guests to come on and speak with me, and they will give their testimony. Tonight, I will be giving my testimony. I will tell my testimony of how God has been in my life, what God has done for me. God has been working in my life for many, many years. What I'm going to start with tonight is I'm going to tell you about how God delivered me from a drug addiction over 20 plus years. I moved back to Greenville, South Carolina, and God has just always been in my life. I started going to church, and I was trying to get over this addiction that I had, and I kept seeking God for the help for it. I started attending the church, the Shady Oak Baptist Church, and every time when we had altar call, I would run to the altar every Sunday, and it was like, God, help me, help me, help me, change me. My wife even said to me, you go to the altar every Sunday. And it was like, I have to go to the altar. They had no knowledge as to what was going on, because I'm just that person. I'm the one that can go to work a full hour. I had a career, but then I had an addiction that I was dealing with, and I was dealing with it in private. Well, I would say it was private, but God knew what I was dealing with. As time went on, I kept going and kept going and kept going after it. I recall one time we had a revival, and a minister came from Maryland, and he had an altar call, and I went to the altar. I stood there, and I was like, God, help me, just help me. The minister was going down, and he was touching people individually and speaking to them. This is when I had my first encounter with the Holy Spirit, because I was saying to myself, Lord, this is what I need help with. Lord, this is what I need help with. When the minister got to me, he laid his hand on my shoulder and one hand on my head, and he said, you were delivered from that crack cocaine addiction that you've been dealing with for years. And before I knew it, I was on the floor. I hit the floor. I couldn't believe it. The Spirit came over me so strong, tears was running out of my eyes, and I was on the floor. And how could he know this? He didn't even know me. He knew nothing about me. But he didn't say it loud, he said it to me. He spoke straight into my spirit, so I knew that God was working. I was on the floor. Altar call was over. They had finished doing what they was doing, but I was still laying in the middle of the floor. Me, I was sharp. I had on a blazer and some pants and a nice jacket, some pants and a shirt, and I was laying on the floor. But my hands were back, and all I could think to myself while I'm laying there, if you've ever been slain in the spirit, when you're laying there, you can't move. You can't. It's just spirit is on you. But you can think. And I was thinking to myself, I'm laying in the middle of the floor. And I got my hands up in the air. And then I was like, my shirt is out my pants. Are my underwear showing? I had so many things going on in my head, but I could not move. All I remember was the usher standing over me, fanning me, saying, you ain't ready yet, baby. He ain't ready yet. So I felt embarrassed, but I did not know what was going on. They continued on with the service. I laid in the floor. They continued to fan me, and finally they brought a chair and picked me up and put me in the chair. I was so weak. But I was so full at the same time that I was speaking to God through my spirit, telling him, I want you to help me. I need help. And he spoke to this pastor who spoke to me, who never met me before, and said that you were delivered from it. I got up out of there and I left, and I was so happy. I just didn't know what to do. I went home and told my wife what was going on, and I admitted my drug addiction and that everything had to change. So fast forward, I kept going to church, and I wound up working in the church. They put me on the ushers ministry. I volunteered for the ushers ministry. From volunteering to being on the ushers ministry, I became the leader of the ushers ministry. So here I am now. I'm working in the church. So with working in the church, they become obedient. So as an usher, we had to be the first ones there and the last ones to leave. And at the time, Shady Oak Pastor Barton, God rest his soul, he would always say that we all had to come to church and we had to be there. If you didn't make it to prayer, you couldn't serve. If you were going to be in ministry, you had to be there on time and you had to serve. You had to pray with the rest of the ministry leaders so that we could all be on one accord. And if you didn't make it to prayer, you wasn't serving that day, which I liked because then it taught us all discipline to be there on time. So I started working in the ministry and ushering. Then as time went, some shift happened in the church. And the director over everyone came to me and asked me to take over the ministries of helps, which means I had every ministry that had to deal with helping people. I was over the ushers ministries, I was over the food service ministries, I was over the grounds ministries, I was over all these ministries at the same time being delivered from my addiction. I was working, so it was keeping me busy, so I had something to focus on. I was focusing in the church, but still, once you start to, when you're trying to beat an addiction or when you're trying to better yourself, Satan is still out there. He's still going to be attacking. He's still going to be coming after you. There's still the same people were calling me, the same people were coming around, and I was still trying to fight this addiction. So as I was working in the church, the more I worked, the harder it got. But I was able to start to move people out of my life. I worked there for a very long time, and then as life would have it, things started to change within the ministry, and I wind up having to take a second job in my own life, and I was working in the evening, so I was unable to attend our Bible studies. So I started going to a Bible study at Redemption World Outreach Center, which is another church. As life would have it, my time at Shady Oak Baptist Church ran out. It was time for me to move. My spirit said to move. So I moved over to Redemption World Outreach Center. And still, I was not doing what I had been doing, but I was still battling with addictions. At Redemption World Outreach Center, the whole time I was there, it was a mega church. And coming from a smaller church, going to a mega church, I just found myself and found my place there in the church. And I was working on me, the word. When the pastor would be speaking, he was speaking directly to me. I didn't have to come in and serve. He was just speaking to me. So I was working on the word. When I was saved, the music saved me and the word kept me. So now I was actually studying the word and paying attention to the word. When I would leave there on Sundays, I would go home and study more of the word. So God had me over there to sit me still, just to deal with me one-on-one, to talk to me, to continue to help me. I stayed there about 8 years. I never could find a ministry that I actually wanted to work in. Every time I would try to go to work, I would want to work in the outreach ministry. But every time I would go to a ministry meeting, I would miss the meeting because I had to work. So I never did really work in a ministry there at Redemption World Outreach Center. Then it was time, after my 8 years there, I had grown and I was getting stronger in the word, and I knew that God was working and helping me. God changed so many things in my life for me. During those 8 years, I was able to go to Manpower up in Charlotte, North Carolina with Bishop T.D. Jakes. I had $40, $20 to get there and $20 to get back. All I knew is that I needed to get to Manpower. I wanted to be in the presence of men who loved Christ, who were trying to seek him at a higher level. I had never been to anything like this before in my life, and it was thousands of men. I drove my 300ZX up there by myself. I went in by myself, and when I got there, Bishop Jake's sermon was so powerful, and he was speaking about David. And that's when I identified with David. I identify with David in the Bible, because David was a guy that was after God's own heart. He wasn't perfect in any way, but he loved God. And he was after God's heart day in and day out. He had some things that he did that weren't right, but he continued to seek God. That's who I am. I continue to seek God on a daily basis, every chance I possibly get. So after being at Redemption for those 8 years and studying the word and leaving and just enjoying the word and doing a lot in the community, because Redemption did a lot in the community in Greenville, South Carolina, I was going with them to work in communities in my own community. At that very same time, there was a new pastor that came to town, and he was actually pastoring a church in my community in Nicholtown. It was Nicholtown Missionary Baptist Church, and it was Pastor Blue. I heard a lot of things about him. I seen him on the news. he was making a big difference in the church. I mean, a big difference in the community. So I was going to Redemption's 8 a.m. service, and I would leave there and go to their 10 o'clock service just to see. And I went in there and listened to Pastor Blues preach, and I was very happy because I was like, I like this man. He has a great word, and he's doing a lot in our community. I personally wanted to work in my own community, so I decided, why not go over to Nicholtown Missionary Baptist Church? Because it was time for me to work, to put my hands to plow, because that's what I am. I'm a worker. I'm a servant. I started at Shady Oak. I was working because I was learning what to do. Then it became service. And I started to serve and serve God. And it wasn't so much as serving man, it was serving God. And when I came to Nicholtown, he had a need. There was a need for me there. So I found a place there where, again, I was over the Ushers Ministry. And Ushers Ministry there is called the First Touch Ministry, which I love. Because we're the first touch of the people who actually walk into the door on Sunday morning. So we need to have the touch of God and the love of God as we welcome the people into the church. I took over the ministry. I helped with the ministry, and we rebuilt it, and the women there, we all worked very well. All the ushers, we worked very, very well together. Ushering is my heart. It's what I do. I love to receive people. In Nicholtown, we were a hugging church. Right now in this COVID-19 era, nobody can touch each other. We have to keep our distance. But in Nicholtown, we was a loving church. So to love on people every morning was a beautiful thing. And you had to come with the love of Christ in you in order to be able to share it with others. All of our ministries were doing that. All the people in our ministry, we had to work on it. We had to let them know we got to work on this, and we did. Now with me, I had gotten through my addiction, and I was thanking the Lord because finally it was like, God, I just need you to take this from me, because God will let you do whatever you continue to do. But I had got to the point I was like, God, I want to do this anymore. I want you to take it from me. Let me back up a little bit. Before I got to Nicholtown, I was at Redemption, and Apostle Ron said in a service, he was preaching about addiction. He said, you're not addicted to the drug, you're addicted to the people. If you get away from the people, the drug will go as well. It was like I had a light bulb moment. So I immediately started pruning the people that I was around that was attached to their drug. And as soon as I started pruning them and separating myself and not making myself available to those people, I no longer had an addiction to that drug. I was thankful for it. So that's why I knew it was time for me to put my hands on working in a church. And that's where I got to Nicholtown and got with First Touch Ministry. Over there, while I was serving at First Touch Ministry, Pastor Blue was doing a foot washing service one particular Sunday, and I was going up to take out tithes, and as I was walking back to my seat, he told me, Bruce, to turn around. And I turned around. I was like, oh Lord, he's going to wash my feet or something, But it wasn't that. He said, God told him that I was the general, that you were the general in this army. So a lot of people who know me now call me the general. So that's the name that was given to me at Nicholtown, the general. And it stuck. I'm ex-military, and it stuck with me. I was a general. If you want something done, speak with the general. The general will help you. And I liked it because I liked serving. And it wasn't about a name or a title. It's just what God says, because this is God's army. This is the kingdom, and I was a general in the army of the kingdom. So as time kept going, serving at Nicholtown, I loved it. We were doing things in our community right here up the street from our house. I got to know the people more. I've lived here for years, but I would leave when my family went to other places. We went to other churches. We didn't go to the churches here in the neighborhood. So now I'm starting to work with the people in the neighborhood who I see daily. And I know all their mothers and fathers and children and everything. So it was like a family I'm working with. During this time, I kept growing stronger in the Word, learning more and more. Pastor Blue was a dynamic teacher, and he gives all of us an opportunity to grow in the Word. We had a marriage ministry. We have so many different ministries that we created and things that we did within that. We would leave and go to different states. We went to Georgia, went to Dawson, Georgia, where we did things down there with other people and took the ministry there. The ministry traveled. We worked hard, and it was an amazing, amazing time there. While there, Fast forward to about 2019, my mother, I have a beautiful mother, God rest her soul, she's not in heaven. She was 82 years old. She worked every day. She worked at Walmart. She loved it. She loved Walmart. And while my mother was working at Walmart, on my job, my company decided that people should start working from home. So I'm working from home, but I didn't understand working from home. I'm not a work from home kind of person. I just didn't like it. Now everybody's working from home, and that's the way of the world. But this was 2019, end of 2018, early 2019. I came home because I'm a people person. I've learned that I'm kind of an extroverted introvert because I don't mind being home alone now. But I like the office environment. I like people. I like being in an environment of people. When I got sent home to work from home, it was almost like I went into a depression. I kept saying, God, I don't know what you're doing. God, I don't understand. God, help me. Are they going to lay me off? What are you doing? God, help me. Help me to understand this, because I was less productive. I just didn't understand what was going on. But little did I know, God knows what he's doing. He doesn't make any mistakes. God knew what he was doing. I was home maybe a month, and my mother got sick. With my mother becoming ill, me working from home gave me an opportunity to take care of my mother, to help her, to work and help my mother. We had to go to various doctor's appointments. She had to go various doctor appointments. We were going to doctor's appointments over and over because we was trying to figure out what was going on with her. So, not to get into specifics, but as my mother's health started failing during this time, God allowed me to be right here with her to help her along the way. So he knew what he was doing, and as her health started to decline. If anybody knows me, they know me and my mother were like best friends. I'm the baby of four. I'm the baby. That's just what it is. My brother is the oldest. My sister is the girl. My middle brother is the favorite, and I'm the baby. Well, during my mother's health decline, there were several surgeries. There was 4 surgeries to be exact. And every time we would go into surgery, I'll never forget the doctor telling us, Ms. Bruster, due to your health, your age, there's a possibility you might not make it. So whenever she would go into surgery, I had my oil. I was in there oiling that bed before she went in. I oiled her before she went. I prayed. I went to God. I said, God, I need you. I need you now. I just need you right now to be with me and my mother as she goes through this. And every time she would go into surgery, I prayed for her. I prayed at the bedside when the doctors would come, and they would allow it, because God is who he is, and he has not failed me yet. He has not failed me. Through this, that was where my faith lied. That's where I stood. That's how strong it was. And God, if it's in your will, then my mother will come out of this surgery with no problem. If that's not what you want for my mother, then I accept your will and I move forward. But thankfully, out of 4 surgeries, 82 years old, she came through every time. She came through every time. And every time I just kept saying, thank you, Lord. But during her illness, and then ultimately her transition, he was faithful to us. He didn't allow her to suffer. He kept her going. Her space. I was totally in charge of my mother's, making sure that her mind and her heart stayed on Jesus the whole time. My mother loved Christ. She taught us to love Christ. So during her transition, there was a time when it was like, I'm going to lose my mind. How can I? You're caught in the middle where God is God, and God is a healer, and God can heal her. But also her health and her age and the things that she had going on was like, she didn't know that she would be able to continue on. She even said, I don't want to do this no more. So I said, well, Mama, God is in control. We trust God. And she was like, baby, I'm talking to God. And me and her talked to God. I never left her side. Never left her side. I was in hospitals, in rehabs, or stuff on the floor. I never left her side. Her heart never changed. Her love for God never changed. And we would be late nights, we would be screaming, Jesus, Jesus, both of us. And the nurses would come down the hall, what's wrong? We was like, nothing. We just calling Jesus. That's all it is. We just calling Jesus. So through it, my point of this is, God, He kept me. He gave me a peace. It says there's a peace that surpasses all understanding. It's real. It's true. God gave me a peace in this. I went to God. One of my good friends' mother, who's a pastor, told me, baby, God doesn't need you to be your mother's advocate. He doesn't need you to be your mother's doctor. He doesn't need you to do anything but just be her son and let God be God. It was like a light went off. I know God is God, but I just had to give it to God and let God do what God's going to do. So God did. We were able to bring my mother home, into this very room. This is where the Holy Spirit came to receive my mother and to take her to the kingdom. And in that transition, He gave me perfect peace. So I've been at peace, and it was a beautiful thing all the way through it. And I love God for it, because as we were going through it, I just thought I would lose my mind. I wasn't going to make it, but God kept me. My mother transitions. My mother transitioned in September. I'm at peace, total peace, just trying to figure out how to move forward, but trusting God all along the way, trusting and relying on God. In September, the following July, my son was in a traumatic car accident. Now we're in 2020. My son was in a traumatic car accident. He was T-boned by a vehicle going at a high rate of speed that they pulled out in front of. They called us and told us to come to the hospital. My son was in Atlanta, Georgia. We were here in Greenville. We went down to the hospital. Now, to say that he was T-boned and the way they described the accident, I myself was thinking, oh Lord, this is going to be a terrible situation. So as I drove for 2 hours, I just prayed. I put on sermons. I listened to music. Told my wife just lay down and go to sleep. God got this. God is in control. We have to trust God. Now, this is 2020. We're dealing with COVID-19. The hospital was talking to us and they was telling us, only one of you will be able to come back. He's in ER, but only one of you can come back. So me and my wife were talking. I was like, babe, if anybody can, because they said he won't wake up. They said he won't wake up. Not that he's in a coma, he won't wake up. He had no internal bleeding, no broken bones. There was no outward injury. They believe he just had a head trauma where he hit his head, or they think he might even had a heart attack because we saw the vehicle coming. But only one of us was going to be allowed to go back. We prayed together. I asked God just to help us in every way that He possibly can. But just as God would have it, favor fell upon us, and the ER nurse said the two of you can go back. We're going to let the both of you go back. Even in this COVID situation, we're going to let you both go back. Me and my wife immediately went in there. Went into that room over our son, and we just repented and started praying. And said, Lord, just help us. And so we knew when I looked at my son lying there with a ventilator in. Now, I never seen anybody with a ventilator before. That was a lot for me. But there was no physical damage. There was no cuts, no bruises, no blood, all the things that I thought I might see. So once I saw that, I knew God already had His hand in it. So we did our part. We prayed, we played music, we played sermons, we spoke healing over him. We did everything we possibly could. They told us we was only going to be in there for an hour. Allowed to be in there for an hour because of COVID-19. But actually they let us stay 4 hours, the favor of the Lord. After that, now from that point, which was July the 18th, this is now January the 9th, my son has been in the hospital for over 150 something days. The number, it's been 5.5 months. He has been in ICU twice. He was in ICU for a month straight. For 2 weeks, he never even moved, never said a word. But God, we stayed faithful. The Lord continued to be there for us. We grew closer to Him. We just kept praying and had friends that were praying for us. Well, God kept him. He opened his eyes. He started to move. He made it out of ICU. After a month or so, he was able to come out of ICU and move to a floor. We were able to go and visit him. Still going to visit. They let us come into the hospital. COVID-19 is still a mess. They won't let people in the hospital. They weren't letting people in the hospital unless the person was end of life scenarios. Well, through the favor of the Lord, we were able to get in and go and see our son and be by his bedside. We were able to go on Saturdays or one day in the week, and we would go and see him and talk to him. He was starting to react to us and speak to us, and it's just amazing the way that God is working through this tragic situation, through this traumatic situation. If I had not had the peace of God that was given to me through my mother's transition, and it's strange that you can get peace in a transition, but the reason he gave me peace in a transition because I know where my mother was going. I know where her heart is. I know that God was there. I know that God had favored us, and he did all the things that he said he would do. She was in a rehab facility, and there was a hurricane, and they were moving all the people from Charleston up here, and they was going to keep her locked not locked, but they was keeping everybody at the rehab facility, and that was on a Memorial Day, I believe it was, or Labor Day, and I was able to move her out that day. They was like, there's no way you're going to be able to get transportation and get her home, because we wanted her home. We were able, the favor of the Lord, let us move our mother home in the midst of hurricanes and people being moved in. So God gave us peace. He gave us peace in the transition. My family and everyone was like, Karl, we're a little worried about you. But there was no need to worry because I had peace. The Lord had given me peace, and he continues to give me the peace. And now even with my son, it's been a lot. It's been a lot. It's been a lot, but God. It's the favor of the Lord that's on our lives, and the power of my testimony, of this testimony that helps us to get through this. My wife, my daughters, my grandkids, everyone we've just pulled together because God continues to show us who he is. He continues to show us. They said that the very first day we went down to meet with the doctors, and the doctors do what the doctors do, and the doctors say what they should say. They told us, you should start, thinking about how you're going to move forward, because this is not a quality of life, and you'll probably want to look into in the life scenarios, because your son, it doesn't look like he's going to make it. They talked in doctor's terms and said all these things, and of course we all got on masks, and all you can see is our eyes, and he's looking at my wife, and I said, okay, doc, thank you. I said, but I want you to know who we are. We're a family of faith. You're a doctor, and you're supposed to tell us what you're supposed to tell us because you're a man. But let me tell you about my God. So our God is capable of healing our son totally. So what we need to do, if you finish talking, is me and my wife need to go back here to our son so that we can start praying over our son. Now, we appreciate what you're saying. And the doctor said to me, he said, sir, I respect your faith and I thank you for that, but I just have to tell you what I need to tell you. And I said, thank you. And I expect you to tell me that every time I come. But every time I come, when you tell me what your medical people say, I'm going to tell you what my God can do. And that's what I've done for the past 5.5 months. My son has had some challenges. He's had some medical setbacks where he was on the floor. He was communicating with us and he was understanding we were there. And then all of a sudden he was back in ICU. He had an infection. He was on a ventilator. He was weaned off a ventilator. His eyes weren't opening or nothing. His eyes came open. So now after all this time, he's been in ICU for 48 days. He just got moved back to the floor. But God, they didn't think he was going to make it. The people in the hospital love him. They just like, it's hard for us. It was hard when we were first to go see him when things were changing, because he was starting to be a little tight. His skin was getting tight because he wasn't moving, because it was a traumatic brain injury, and the brain had to start regenerating and talking and telling the body what to do. And we had a point one time when I went with my family, my wife and my kids, and we said, look, we got to look with our faith eyes. When we go see him, we have to look at him with our faith eyes. We walk in looking at him with natural eyes, but then you have to start looking with your faith eyes. So as my family and I continue to watch my son and look at my son with our faith eyes, and we're trusting and believing and relying on God. My pastor, George Watson, even told me, he said, Brother Bruster, he didn't call me Brother Bruster, he said, Karl, everyone knows that you trust God. God needs you to rely on him right now. And when he said that, it was like, because we all trust God, but to rely on God is another level. And that's where we're at right now. Even with all that's going on in this world right now, with COVID-19, with the racial injustice, don't even get me started on last week, but all that's going on right now, we have to rely on God. He's the one thing that remains the same. He never changes. He will get us through it. So my son presently is still in the hospital. He's back to the floor. And in all of his transition, he's even suffered a collapsed lung. But he's breathing on his own. He's not on a ventilator. This ain't nothing but God. There's no way anybody can tell me that this ain't God. And so, with that being said, if I could say anything to anyone right now, I just want to encourage everyone that continue to trust God and rely on God. Go deeper in the Word with God. Continue to always just seek God for everything, because He will give you the peace that surpasses all understanding. And in our situation right now, I could go and curl up in a corner sometime, but man, I'm in this house. I'm praising God every day. My music is loud. I create my peace, and I love the Word of the Lord. I love my God Word family, my God Word ministry family, and I find that as we testify, our testimony helps another person. We all help each other with our testimony. So I would like to thank you all for just sitting with me and listening to me today on Testimony Tuesday. And I will be back next week. And as we keep going, I will have guests that will have a testimony for you. This was just the first one. This is my testimony. And I still have a lot to say. But I want to thank you all for your time, for your listening pleasures, just for being there. And if I could just encourage you, please continue to trust, rely on God, continue to pray. And let's all move Godward. Thank you, and have a great evening.